welcome to this week's episode of the Time Travel Theory with me, Matthew Salzer. So, with Star Trek Picard coming up, just to show, rocking it, I figured I would do an analysis of Star Trek's time travel, which, as we know, because of how much Star Trek there is, there's quite a bit. I mean, you've got the old movies, the new movies, you've got 5 different series, 6 include, going on to 7 including Picard, but long story short, there's quite a few. As I've mentioned before, there are 2 different theories of time travel in science fiction. There's the single timeline theory, which is that you're literally jumping back into the timeline, and then there's the dual timeline theory, which means instead of jumping back to your timeline, you're jumping to an alternate timeline, leaving yours unaffected but changing this one. Both of these appear in Star Trek. The example of the latter would be the J.J. Abrams verse, where because of a specific type of time travel, it created an alternate reality which is currently coexisting with the current reality, so they're basically unaffected. Then you've got multiple examples of the former. Alternate timeline Tasha going back and creating Sela. Just the fact that the Enterprise C altered things by not being up for the Klingons against the Romulans. Another example of A would be time when Q decided to have Picard go back, and Picard insisted that the original timeline remain unchanged and he would appear in a new timeline. Star Trek 4 is solely based on time travel. Then you also have the various predestination paradoxes. Trying to get into specific examples is just impossible when I'm doing an overview. This is basically something where I would have to go into every single time travel instance. If you have some examples, be sure to list that, because as I said, a lot of Star Trek. Star Trek First Contact is another example of time travel. But yeah, lots of Star Trek, lots of time travel. Bet. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below, again, if you want to see some specific examples of Star Trek time travel reviewed. Let me know. I will do it, whether it's an episode or a movie or etc, etc, etc. Also, be sure to subscribe to my social media. My Twitter and my Instagram are both at Matthew Salzer. I was lucky in getting that. I'm probably going to be doing some Lost Tapes next. So yeah, thank you very much. Have a blessed day. Bye! Welcome to this week's edition of the Time Travel Theory with me, Matthew Salzer, your host. Now, this week I decided that since Fantasy Island is coming out, the reboot, the movie, the abomination that is the reboot movie, I decided to go over and review Fantasy Island when it comes to time travel. And we're not talking about anything else aside from the original, the classic with Ricardo Montalban. But here's the thing, this is going to be a short review, and then another thing is that all of my theories, you notice that I don't have my little whiteboard, are going to be thrown out the window because time travel in Fantasy Island just is not the same as time travel in any other science fiction franchise, because this is not science fiction, this is fantasy. So, long story short, we have no idea if the time travel in question is through the A, singular timeline theory, or B, alternate reality theory. We just don't know, because all those questions just are not answered within the context of each episode. Is it possible that it was self-contained? Possibly. Is it possible that it was actually a part of the history of that world? Possibly. We just don't know. All we know is that created a lot of fun and entertainment, as entertainment should be. Thank you very much. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below on what you would like to see me do next in terms of this time travel series. Or I've noticed that the viewership has been a little down a little bit. Maybe I should just axe this all together. Either way, let me know. You should see my Twitter and Instagram handle somewhere around here below me. Like I said, thank you very much. See you next time. Hello! Welcome back. I am now finally doing a time travel theory video again after so many months. I am Matthew Salzer. Thank you very much for watching. Now, I have already done a time travel theory episode on Star Trek, but I felt like with some recent events going on and me being reminded about certain recent events that I would cover a specific detail within Star Trek that a lot of people probably don't notice. Now, if you watch the original Star Trek series, there is a certain detail about the future that they predicted which did not come to pass, and that was that in the 1990s there was something called the Eugenics War. This war was where genetically modified individuals ended up taking over and doing mass exterminations, mass genocides against lesser beings, and ultimately, while normal humanity won in a World War III, people like Khan and several other of these genetically modified individuals ended up jumping on a ship and heading out into space. Eventually we got the Khan episode, and then the Wrath of Khan, etc. However, as time went on, the eugenics wars got pushed back a little bit, and we saw that the 1990s was actually normal by the time of Voyager. There are also several other events that were pushed back as well or just didn't happen. For example, in Star Trek The Next Generation, it was mentioned in the 90s that something like cryosleep was a big thing. However, that was eventually phased out as well, and we didn't really hear about it again. Now, a lot of people would probably say that this was the result of retcon and continuity errors, but before I go into anything, a little bit of review. So if you've watched my channel before, you know that I subscribe to two different time travel theories, one of which is the single theory, which is that when you time travel, you're literally jumping from point A to point B, or as I've labeled it, point 1 to 2. And then the second theory is the alternate reality theory, wherein you're not exactly jumping from point A to point B, you are jumping from timeline A to timeline B, and your timeline is intact, but the timeline that you're jumping to, you changed completely. Star Trek has done both of these. Former example would be the Enterprise C getting displaced from time, leading to an alternate timeline where the Klingons and the Federation are at war, and the latter example being the Kelvin timeline, where you have Star Trek Picard taking place in the Prime timeline and the Abrams verse taking place in the alternate timeline, and Spock jumping between them, of course. So in order for what I have been talking about to actually make sense, even though it's never been fully addressed, we have to subscribe to the single timeline theory. Now, as I said, in the single timeline theory, you've got, of course, the fact that you're jumping from point A to point B, and whatever you do here in point B is going to cause effects and could very well result in another different timeline, as Doc Brown put it in Back to the Future, or basically a timeline A. This ascribes to various theories like the butterfly effect, the ripple effect, anything that basically if you're in that timeline, you're changing it just by being there. Like I said, there are numerous time jumps within Star Trek. I could probably do an entire years worth of series just on Star Trek time jumps alone. So the assumption has to be that as they make those different time jumps, then the original series timeline has essentially been erased, and that what we have gotten has been this series of updated compilations of time jumps that have resulted in a timeline more resembling our own than the original Star Trek timeline, as I mentioned, where eugenics wars took place in the 80s. Instead, it was pushed up into the 2000s, and that seems to be relatively consistent. Again, this has not officially been made canon. This is just a theory that I hold to. Thank you much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought, what you would like to see next in the travel theory. Very much for Low Rooted, who inspired this. Be sure to check out his channel as well. Also give him a like, share, subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Welcome back to my channel. I am Matthew Salzer. This is Time Travel Theory, and you're watching my assessment of the final countdown. No, not that song. That song actually came after this, though it's a pretty good song. No, I'm talking about the 1980 movie The Final Countdown, in which the crew of the USS Nimitz, at the time the most advanced supercarrier of the US Navy, gets transported back to December 6, 1941, and tries to prevent the disaster that is Pearl Harbor. Why am I doing it on today, August 1st? Because this is the 40th anniversary of the movie. Yes, it came out August 1st, 1980. Now, just for some review. So, long story short, there's two types of time travel theories that I usually review on my channel. The first is the single timeline theory, which is that you're literally traveling from point A to point B, and then the second one is where you're jumping from one universe to another universe where everything is the same except that you jump back in what is their past, essentially. Your timeline is intact, theirs is the one that gets screwed up. Now, The Final Countdown is one of those movies that not only conforms to the former, where you're literally jumping from point A to point B, but it also deals with the grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox is basically the idea that you are predetermined in that you were the one who caused your grandfather to meet your grandmother, but at the same time, they had to get together in order for you to exist. It's a confusing mess. Long story short, the very people who built the USS Nimitz were the ones who traveled back in time and got stuck there. Is it confusing? Absolutely, but that's how it works out. But wait, Matthew, you're probably asking, what about the grandfather paradox wherein it's another timeline? Yes, that is how the Terminator universe works, but this is not the Terminator universe. You see, in the Terminator universe, the loop was not only breakable, but you had various different alternate timelines created from the actions of people within those separate timelines. See, this is just a constant loop. This is one timeline, you're going back, creating it, and then coming forward full circle. Another thing to keep in mind is that in The Final Countdown, it is actually a natural phenomena that caused them to time travel back. You see, in most other time travel franchises, there's some kind of time travel that was artificially created involved. In this one, it's a natural recurring phenomenon, some kind of temporal vortex that causes the people to get sucked back in time, and the same vortex propels them forward. Confusing, I know, but that's just how it goes. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you thought of The Final Countdown. Give it a watch. It's a good read. It is kind of dated, but it's still a pretty good watch. Be sure to follow me on both Twitter and Instagram. I post a bunch of interesting stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Welcome to this week's Time Travel Theory with your host Matthew Salzer, where I talk about various time travel franchises and how time travel works in those franchises. So let's get into this. So as you could tell from the title, we are going to be reviewing the Bill and Ted's franchise, where the whole premise is they are going back into history in order to accomplish various things. The first time in order to get an art project done, and the second time to avoid death. And here we are with this new one in which they have to figure out how to actually become a success because they're not doing very well. So for those of you who follow my channel, here is a very brief review of how things go in the time travel concept in entertainment. You have either the single timeline theory, where you're jumping from literally one point in the timeline to the next, in which you can create stuff like paradoxes, the butterfly effect, etc., etc. And then you have the dual timeline theory, where you are jumping not to another part in your timeline, but you're essentially creating an alternate timeline in which yours is unaffected, you're just gone, and you're going into a past version of the previous timeline. What we're going to go over is that Bill and Ted's is the former. Not just that, but they have the whole predestination paradox situation going, where you literally are interacting with yourself and from various points in the timeline. We can see that in the first one, where their literal future selves pop up in the convenience store parking lot where they are being briefed by Future Guy. That's another thing with the whole idea of the predestination paradox, is that the very future that they are interacting with is going to create the future that they are interacting with. It can be a little confusing, I know, especially when we're talking about a franchise that is not Terminator, where the two timeline theory is very prevalent. However, that's just it. I don't really know what else to say, but either way, Bill and Ted, the trilogy is finally being put together. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment down below what you think of not just this series, but Bill and Ted. Maybe if you'd like to see some other specific franchises reviewed, be sure to check out my Twitter and my Instagram. Subscribe to my Twitter and my Instagram, both at Matthew Salzer. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Welcome welcome to this week's edition of the Time Travel Theory. I am Matt Salzer. So in case you don't know what is important with this specific date that I'm posting this video, is because 5 years ago, the revival series Heroes Reborn made a debut, and it's also the awkward number of 14 years ago around this time Heroes made its debut. So for those of you who don't know, the idea was that Heroes was kind of X-Men-like in that it had actual superheroes with abilities. It was very in-depth. I cannot spend any one video talking about the overall story because it's so in-depth, but long story short, time travel was involved with a character named Hiro Nakamura. Before we go over some brief review, as I mentioned before in my videos, there are two types of time travel within science fiction. The first is the single timeline theory, where you're literally traveling within same timeline from point A to point B, and then there's the alternate timeline theory where you're jumping from your own timeline to another reality, creating another timeline entirely from which you cannot escape. The former would include franchises like Back to the Future, the latter would include franchises like the Terminator series, and the ones that have both would actually, interestingly enough, be Star Trek. Heroes is very interesting because primarily from the way things are, any time travel that's done to the past is not only the single timeline theory, but it is also the whole idea of traveling into the future. That's actually where most of the time travel takes place, going in and seeing alternate realities. In case you don't know, season 1 solely focuses on an alternate reality that's seen constantly where New York is blown up by a nuclear warhead. Actually not a nuclear warhead, someone literally blowing up because they have the power of a nuclear warhead. I should note that that's not the only disaster that they're able to prevent, but it's one of them. But then we have an even more complicated concept with the whole idea of being able to alter the future based on the past. This is explored in Back to the Future with the whole idea of going back to the past and creating an alternate timeline. Well, it's a similar thing going on here, except it's because of the fact that you were able to go to the future, see what's going on, and then go back to the past and alternate events, and then create the alternate timeline. Also, there is some time travel into the past which involves the whole predestination paradox, where you actually created something as a result of traveling back to the past, which actually influences your future. Loop-de-loop-de-loop. This is actually different because the past time travel is not altered in any way. That loop is sealed. However, as I mentioned, future time travel can help change the future, so it is still one alternate timeline. It gets a little complicated because they changed the timeline 3 or 4 times, and then just in the original show, and then they do it one more time in Heroes Reborn, which was the revival series. It was a good show for its time, and to be fair, the new series did have a merit to it in that it was trying to reboot it but still involved the old characters. There was just some stuff involved, and long story short, we will never really know what all happened with the series. Maybe we might see something in, maybe we might not. So yeah, that is Heroes on this anniversary of the series. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below what you would like me to do in future time travel theory installments. Just like a lot of stuff, I'm going to be taking a break this next month in order to focus solely on Halloween content, because that's something I like to do. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Salzer. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Hello! Welcome to this edition of the Time Travel Theory series. My name is Matthew Salzer, and as you know, if you come here, I do various time travel science fiction franchises, talk about them, and talk about how exactly things work and all that. And this being the holiday season, I thought I would review a holiday favorite that involves time travel. It is The Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life, this classic with Jimmy Stewart, in which he discovers what would have happened if he hadn't been born, because he's going through a hard time and said, I wish I were never born. And his wish is granted, and he gets to see just how much of an impact that makes. But first, a little review because it has been a while. So as you can see on this little chart, I have the 2 theories of time travel that go on in the franchise. The first is the single timeline theory, where you are literally jumping from point A to point B, causing a butterfly effect and affecting things when you're in point B in the single timeline. You could very well create an alternate timeline, as you can see a little here, where the original timeline is erased and a new one is created. And then you have the dual timeline theory, in which you are not actually going to the past of your current timeline, you are going to the past of an alternate timeline, creating an alternate timeline. You're jumping out of this timeline, out of your universe, and you're jumping into another universe. That's how it works. Now, It's a Wonderful Life, as I said, is actually an alternate timeline, alternate history scenario in which George, because of his frustrations, things are not exactly going his way, despite him being a very nice guy, are going to the point where he said, I wish I was never born. Well, an angel grants his wish and allows him to see what exactly would have happened if he had not been born. A lot of things go wrong. The town that he's built up and helped to contribute to and helped so many people, they're just not the same. And his wife is an old maid, never got married, and there's just so much that has gone wrong because of the fact that he was not born, and he got to see this. And this is why it counts as kind of an alternate timeline, because he's taken from the timeline in which he was a part of and is shown what exactly would happen if he is in another one in which he is not born. And it just goes to reflect the butterfly theory in that everything that is done, everything that happens is a chain reaction in which things can very clearly go wrong. And that's just an example of what happens in It's a Wonderful Life. And he comes back to his original timeline and his original life, realizing how much he has going for him, how blessed he is. Not to mention that when everything comes together, well, guess what? When he comes back home, all the people that he's helped out, everyone realizes we need to help George because he has helped us so much. And what happens? Everyone contributes, and it is a wonderful thing. Everyone is singing, the angel gets his wings, and everything's happily ever after. But again, this just goes to show what exactly can happen when you are removed from a timeline. What happened? It's like we don't know the impact that we make on people's lives unless something like that happens. And quite frankly, we will never have that opportunity. But it just goes to show what can happen if someone is removed from a timeline. What would have, we don't know how intricately everything is intertwined, and this just goes to show that example. And it just goes to show what happens right now. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, everything just seems like doom and gloom. It doesn't look good. But we need to remember that we have each other, we've got the people that we have in our lives, we're going to get through this, and we just need to remember how much we affect each other. And it does seem like the world is a little bit more divided nowadays than it has ever been, but we just need to remember the fact that we can help each other, and we just need to be thankful for what we have and be able to search forward and all that. So yeah, that's A Wonderful Life, and it just goes to show just how things are. And also this falls into that rare timeline alternate history of it being done by supernatural means. There's no type of time machine involved here. George goes because an angel just brings him into this, and then an angel brings him back in. It can't be done otherwise. I mean, it's that rare thing, because when we think of time travel, we think of a time machine that allows you to jump from one timeline to the other. That's not the case here. So either way, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Also, thank you very much for this year in terms of these time travel videos. To be honest, this is not one of my better theories. This is more of a passion project, but it's content and I'll keep doing it. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, be sure to like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of the various time travel theory videos that I've done over this year. Comment down below. Maybe give a suggestion. I do take suggestions. And be sure to follow me at Matthew Salzer on both my Twitter and Instagram. Those are listed here, and those are listed in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.